Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Experts, Securing Investor Funding. This is our last session for the women. I'm so excited to have all of you here. Give me a second while we bring everyone on stage. For the speakers, mic on, cam on. And while we're waiting for Rajiv to come on, Courtney, do you just want to start and say who you are, what you do, why you're here, and yeah, go from there.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Brand. I'm the founder of a company called The Lighthouse, which is in the future of workspace. We are a company that and employees to match them with the right insight at the right time to keep growing in their career and leveraging technology to do that at scale. The perspective I hope to share today is we have raised money from angels, micro VCs, and also friends and family. So hopefully to share any insights that are helpful for the crowd around that topic. We're also gearing up for an institutional round. So if anyone's thinking about VC funding, happy to answer questions around that as well.
You want to go next, Rajiv?
Sure. Rajiv Kapoor. I'm one of the 3 leaders of an up-and-coming fund called Chai Angels. One of our focus areas is investing in female founders, and we've invested in over 30 female founders like Courtney. And we also our core mission is to do well for our investors and encourage females to invest with us or in our fund and to help restore the balance.
Pranava.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Pranava. I'm currently an entrepreneur in residence over at Greylock Partners. We're an institutional VC down on Sand Hill. So I've been with the firm for about 6 months right now. And So I've been with the firm for about 6 months right now. I'm on the enterprise side. Prior to that, I was over at AWS. And prior to that, I was actually at a Greylock portfolio company called Rubrik down in the Bay Area. So as far as perspectives, as I'm in the process of incubating right now, I hope to share what that process looks like. And I also have the privilege of being on a couple of due diligence for some investments the firm makes. So some perspectives from that I can also share. So looking forward to it.
Great, guys. So as you can tell, we have experiences from all over the board, from investor to the investee to the entrepreneur in residence. So ask away. But before we get started with audience questions, we're going to ask one question. What is the best piece of advice you can give someone when it comes to securing investor funding? And Courtney, we're going to let you start first.
It's hard to choose one thing, but I think that I guess the first piece of advice is if you don't need to take on investor funding, that's great. Like, don't think that that's your one and only path. Try to make money, and to get investor money, you need to also create revenue and generate revenue with your company. So start there. And while there are some, success stories of people who raise with not, $1 of revenue coming in, those are usually second-time founders. They're people who have, incredible LinkedIns. And even if you have that, that still might be a challenge. So I think just to validate your business as much as possible through revenue, and that will make the fundraising process a lot easier.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say for me, it would be realize that eventually the investors are going to be looking for milestones and such. But in the very beginning, you're going to get investors just on trust of who you are, and just realize that it might be family, it might be friends, but that's what they're going to see, that they trust you as a person, and that will be enough for some people.
You're up, Pranava.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Reggie. I think trust is a huge aspect of it. I'll say one that's more along the opportunity side of things, which is for what it is that you're trying to raise funding for, make sure it ties to something that's secular. So something that is big, something that is not temporary, but something that's secular that you can ride with, and something that you're leveraging in terms of what you want to be building.
Great. So let's segue into this. What are the top 3 things that you're looking for in someone before you invest? And Courtney, since you're not an investor in Pranava, what are 3 things that you look in an investor for when you're looking to go get investment? And Rajiv, we'll start with you on this one.
Okay. Just like Courtney was saying, hard to say like 3 things, but I would say, number 1 is someone I can really relate to. What I want to have dinner with this person, introduce them to my wife, somebody I can get along with. And then are they articulating a problem that they're going to solve and sort of saying the solution makes sense to me, right? Because maybe this one makes more sense than another one. So that's two things. And then are they making progress? Like, are they showing demonstrable progress? And then those three things would be really important for me.
Pranava?
Yeah. So in addition to what Rajiv said, I think one thing to really, and I think you should explicitly communicate this, but also show not tell, which is why you and your team are uniquely equipped to solve this particular problem. So another way that's also usually brought up is the founder insight, right? Like, why is it that you guys are the right team to take this problem on? So that's one part that we really look for.
And Courtney, you're up.
Yeah, to answer like what we look for in investors, I think to Rajiv's point, number one, there has to be a relationship. There has to be some kind of chemistry. This is a very intense relationship that you're entering into. And so that trust is super important, and the founder has to trust the investor as well. Secondly, I would say they have to believe in you and the vision, because a million things will probably change along the way. I think COVID has shown that, the way you deliver on that vision might change, but as long as they're aligned with what are the things that you 100% believe are true, that you're betting this business on, as long as they agree to those four things, then you guys will grow as a founder and investor relationship over time. And I think that ties into the trust element. And then thirdly is how they can support you. And not every investor needs to support you. Not everyone needs to be a subject matter expert in what you're building. That's unrealistic. It's great if that can happen, but there's so many other ways investors can support you, whether it's, giving you the cash that you need to continue growing the business, or providing introductions that can help further your business, or connecting you with other founders within their companies. So thinking about that and making sure you have some investors that can help you in ways in addition to, funding the growth for the company.
And probably my favorite question forever, and Rajiv, I do not envy you at all as an investor. I bet your job is just like, but how do you deal with the roller coaster of, Courtney, from your perspective, how do you get so many no's before you get that yes? Mm-hmm. And Rajiv, how do you handle telling everyone no before you tell them yes? And Pranava, what's your experience in the whole investor and like getting all those no's before you can actually get a yes as well? So we'll start with you, Pranava, and then we'll go to you, Rajiv.
Yeah. In terms of, I'll answer it from the perspective of having seen a couple of pitches and how those decisions are made. Right. I definitely think that the secularity part that I talked about of the markets, why the timing is correct, and why this team are the three of the most important things that we look for. And it is sometimes really hard when especially if you believe in the area and you believe in the team, but the timing might not be correct, right? It is definitely hard. And so to that point, I think, I would say, unfortunately, you do have to go through until all three of those meet the criteria, right?
And Rajiv, how do you handle telling so many people no? Pretty good in that, yes.
Well, funny enough, like when I met Courtney and we had our first meeting, I actually had to say no initially because I just wasn't. I thought she was amazing, but I wasn't comfortable with like the business being at the stage that I was looking for. But you know what? Saying like, okay, maybe I can't invest right now, but here are the ways that I could invest, and I'm still happy to help you. I'm still happy to make introductions. So I think, putting the relationship ahead of the yes no kind of helps. But also I have to say it's hard because yes, people like me are looking at a lot of deals, and then you kind of have to allocate money into the best opportunities. So just like pointing that out, and so it's tough, and yet I can still be helpful and try to get that person there. So that's the hope.
Before you answer, do you know how many no's you've gotten before you got your first yes?
I can't even keep track anymore. Because like a lot of founders, I mean, I'm a first-time founder, and I made the mistake of talking to VCs way too early when we were not even nearly, so But I think to Rajiv's point, I mean, those will always sting, but the things that sting a lot more are the slow no's. So if someone tells you, you know, I think you're great, but this is not my space, like that to me, if they're an interesting person, I just got to talk to an interesting person for 20 minutes or an hour, and there's probably something that they might have said that might have been interesting for me to take back as I go into my next meeting, or even go into certain ways we're approaching the business. So I think one is, you know, being intentional about who you're taking meetings with and making sure you're doing the upfront homework to make sure you're not getting no's that are just wasting people's time on both accounts. But then two, when you get a no, realizing, well, I just met hopefully a really interesting, you know, good human, and that in itself is valuable and interesting. But then also, you know, knowing that you don't need a lot of yeses, and the more no's you get through, the faster you get to the yeses. So I think reminding yourself that it's a numbers game and trying to enjoy the process as much as possible and the relationships you build along the way.
So for both you and Pranav, how did you fund your business that was too early for venture capital?
For us, at first, it was my own savings. So I had been in management consulting beforehand, and luckily that allowed me to get almost a year of runway while also being pretty scrappy. We then raised a friends and family round, and then started generating revenue, not enough to fund the full cost of the business. And that's when we went for an angel round. So I think we have, based on companies at our stage, we've not raised that much. And a lot of that came into being really scrappy and never overspending, and just trying to validate everything and as much as possible in the cheapest way possible, which is not always the path, right? And I think, you know, at some point you need to start investing to really do it at the best stage. But the concept of an MVP can be built out in such a low cost way these days, because there's so much third party tech you can string together to do what you needed to do, that was the approach we took.
And Pranav, same question to you.
Yeah, so I have not raised my funding round yet, so that is coming up soon. But I will continue on a train of thought that Courtney mentioned, which is validating your concept and really coming into that investor pitch with a lot of understanding of why it is that you're building what it is that you're building, right? And maybe just in terms of two parts. One is getting meetings with people, right? To start validating your concept, especially if you're trying to do something more along enterprise products. You really have to get those initial meetings with people to really understand what it is that you're building for them, and understanding enterprise use cases. You know, like a lot of the times there's the intuition that you have, and it turns out that that's actually not what people want. They want something completely different. It also can be the case that as an engineer, I think that there's all these cool things to go build. And at the end of the day, they just want a reporting solution that makes things much easier for them to generate reports. So being mindful about getting those intros and talking to the right people, and then really engineering what are the conversations you need to have to get that insight towards what that MVP could be. That's a skill that I've had to develop, and I think it's something that's immensely useful when you're going about that process.
Rajiv, do you have anything to add there?
Just that, like, he was talking about getting to MVP, and that's really important because most of my investments happen when I feel the MVP has been reached, like product market fit. So not only MVP, but like the customers like it or feel good about it. There's some engagement there, and more of the product can be sold. So I think that is really, really, really important, and just getting it right, being able to show, if you can show the proof points to the investor, like that this is the product, the customers, first few customers really like it, we can get more customers. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for that kind of proof. So that's really important, that's helpful.
Then one thing to just add there, I like to think in terms of frameworks for how to go about getting answers to things. And one tool that I find really useful is asking the question, what needs to be true for assertion X? So you might make a claim that enterprises need better visibility into their cloud environments. Okay, so as a follow-up, you could say, well, what needs to be true in order for them to need this visibility? Okay, one, maybe they're having issues by not having visibility, right? Or maybe they've been bit by security breaches before, right? So once you start asking questions around what needs to be true, then you can start engineering who you need to talk to get those perspectives.
So that brings me into an interesting question about frameworks and how do you guys evaluate your concept, both as an entrepreneur and Rajiv, for you when you're evaluating a deal? What are some frameworks you use? So Pranava, you can expand, or we can move to Courtney on what you think.
Let me come back to that one. Courtney,
yeah.
I'll let you go, and I'll answer another one right afterwards.
This is an interesting question because I can't, there's no immediate frameworks from like, I use framework X, Y, and Z to validate a business. There's almost so many things along the way. Obviously validation comes from customers, paying customers in the truest form, but there's other ways you can validate ahead of time. And I think I think as much as you can, to the point just now of listing out what are the 4 to 5 things I believe that makes me think that the world needs this, and then starting, and maybe it's only 2 to 3, whatever the number, and then starting to get people's perspective on those 4 to 5 things. And not even just, do you believe this is true, but how important is this to you? How big of a pain is this to you? Why is this important to you? And I think a lot of businesses can be boiled down to 4 to 5 hypotheses that make why that business exists make sense.
So Rajiv, for you, I would assume you do have some type of framework that you use when evaluating deals. Elaborate on some?
Yeah. I'm going to laugh about that because if you ask me to like write it down or like what framework it is, I have no idea. This is like some stuff knocking out of my head. But basically, I'm looking at like probability of success. I need a high probability of success because I want less companies that are going to kind of bring down the portfolio. So that's my personal starting point. And then number 2 is like product versus other products. So think about like a Tesla compared to like a Ford, right? Or a Ford compared to a GM, maybe the Ford GM, I can't feel that product difference, but with the Tesla I can. So I kind of think of I'm product based. So I come from marketing, and to me, that's like a big engine. Like if it's just an awesome product, it's probably got a good chance of driving forward. So, and then I'm looking at the team, but that's a little bit subjective. I mean, the team that got me to that awesome product, it means a lot. Mm-hmm. And then ability to raise money, like the team should have the ability to raise money because that's going to be the fuel. Those are kind of some of the things I'm looking at. So if they raised some money, if they raised 500K or $1 million or something, then I start to feel more comfortable. If they're having a hard time raising like 100K, I'm like, I'll still look at it, but that's one of my criteria. Like we're not hitting that yet. Okay, you need to pay attention.
Pranava, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I thought of a couple of other ones here. So thank you, Courtney and Raji, for the inspiration. There's a VC firm called Unusual, and one of their founders, John Veronis, said something really, really cute and applicable, which is no one buys from a startup if they can help it, right? Because you don't know if that startup is going to be around 6 months from now. So in such an environment, the only way you're going to get a sale from someone is if you're really solving an acute, important, urgent pain point. Right? And this goes to the Eisenhower matrix, right? There's the importance of something, and then there's the urgency of something. So as a startup, you really want to be in search for building something that is important and urgent for an organization. Otherwise, if it's important but not urgent, they might decide to buy it 2 quarters down the line, right? So, and that's kind of a death blow as a startup. You don't want to keep knocking on their door and going, hey, are you going to buy me now, right? So, looking for something that's important and urgent. And then there's a follow-up to that as well, which is, as a startup, you don't have that many resources. You can't boil the ocean. And so if you're going to go after, you really need to do the diligence to find what is the important urgent use case that you're going to go solve with the limited resources that you have to build your product, right? So yeah, just a couple of things to throw in there.
Great, and this one's for Rajiv and Courtney. We're in a pandemic right now. Do you find it harder to find investors during a pandemic? And Rajiv, are you investing more or less, or does the pandemic even like make it, a way into your decision-making process? And Courtney, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, Rajiv actually has a really interesting perspective on this. I remember he and I had a call at the beginning of the pandemic or at the beginning of the New York lockdown, and I won't steal his thunder, so I'll let him share, but it's an interesting perspective, especially as a growing fund. Definitely, it's harder to find investors because Rajiv and I met at an in-person event where we were leaving the event and happened to be in the elevator together. Another one of angel of ours, we met at a networking event. I was grabbing my bag. We started talking. We both had lived in Asia. Like those chance encounters are just not happening. And it's really unfortunate because if you don't just have a bunch of angels in your network, you can recreate those in a virtual environment, but it is very difficult. I think that raising at the institutional round is still very much happening because that's a business that needs to keep going. At the angel level, I think it's more difficult to start to create and foster those relationships. It's not impossible. So I would still be putting yourself out there in a virtual environment and being on apps like Lunch Club or coming to events like these and then following up with investors you see here. But not expecting it to happen overnight. One Zoom is not going to secure your check, especially with an angel. So really seeing that as a relationship building opportunity and continuing to invest in that. And luckily, I mean, we're all at home, so there's more time to Zoom, but it's definitely more challenging, but it's definitely not impossible. It just requires a little bit more effort.
Before Rajiv answers that, where have you found online during the pandemic that someone can go? I know you mentioned Lunch Club. Are there other sites out there that people can check out?
Yeah, so it's less about websites, I would say, and more about lists that exist. And I'm happy to share, there are some lists that are floating around. Basically, the angels that are still investing want to be known, and they also are getting less deal flow right now because they're not going to events. And so a couple of founders that I know have been circulating these lists of both angels, micro VCs, and also VCs saying like, we are actively investing during this time and want to be known, and here are the categories we invest in. So they're trying their best to make themselves known. I think events and speakers at events are a great place as well because they're looking to put themselves out there. Lunch Club is good just to kind of informal networking. It's very difficult to make it more focused to find an investor. But I think, going on Eventbrite, seeing what kind of VC and angel and investor events are coming up, attending those, and actually sticking around for the awkward virtual networking. Like that is where you're going to meet them. Charlie O'Donnell has a great newsletter and also event series, and he's using this platform too to foster some of that post-event networking. So it's happening. It's awkward. If you can just strike up a good conversation and make it a good time, like you will have success. So those would be some suggestions.
Great, thank you. And Rajiv, same question to you. Pandemic, investing, tell us more.
Yeah. So, I mean, my feeling is when times got tough, I should be investing more than ever because there are great opportunities. A lot of companies raised rounds in 2020 at the same price as 2019, for example. And companies that are growing strongly in 2020, that means a lot. Not everybody's rising in 2020. So that almost is helpful as well. So, and it's also the responsibility of investors. I mean, this is the time we should be investing. So I'm a believer in that. I think a lot of companies I see on the marketplace, I don't know what they're all doing, but I did hear of one that, for example, was focusing on smaller investments because they couldn't trust, big investments on Zoom. So I think anecdotally, there's probably all kinds of stuff happening. I don't think I speak for the industry or anything like that, but if you're looking for good opportunities, good companies, now's the time. And if you're, even through 2020, I know it's been hard, but when companies are really crisp and clear about the way they're heading and they really do look successful, those companies raise money. I'd say the best can always get there and you can always make progress. It's just harder. Yeah.
And what are some of the unknowns that you need to be ready for in the process of securing investor funding? Is there like a common thing that people forget about when they're going to approach you, Rajiv? And Courtney or Pranava, I know Pranava, you're early in the stage, but is there something you've gone to an investor with or talked to someone with and they're like, wow, you forgot this. This is big. And what can an entrepreneur learn from in that way?
So I'd say like one of the things that strikes me now as you ask that question is when I meet companies that are telling me like how great their product is, or they're like, look at this thing we've designed it, it's excellent, and they talk all about it, but they're not talking about where the company's going. If they're not talking about where the company's going, I know they're not. That's an issue. So I'd say that's a big thing. And if you look at the deck, right, it doesn't need to be very long. It should be a very clear, maybe 12-page story that shows kind of clearly like where this thing can end up. So as an example, I invested in this company, Blockable. They have automated factories building these blocks that can be stacked into apartment buildings. So, but they weren't saying, look at this block. They're saying, look, we can automate this and produce like millions of these things in 5 years. That's kind of, and I was like, that sounds pretty cool. I don't see a lot of companies like working on that. That's unique. And you're showing me a cool vision.
Great. Pranava, do you have anything that you've noticed in your search?
In a couple, just to add to that, a couple of things. Make sure you talk about why now. This ties into also talks into secular trends and secular markets. Again, I personally tend to forget to talk about why me. So make sure you also talk about why you're the right person to solve this problem. In addition to that, I think for a couple of the pitches that I've seen, people tend to jump right into the solution, but it's not clear that they understand the customer use cases that they're solving. It's really easy to jump right into to what you're building and not why you're building it. So make it very clear to the investor that you've done your due diligence with the customer, and if at all you can, list a set of names, like who you spoke to, if you can have any pre-commits, or if you have any design partners that you can line up. It makes it so much more powerful and compelling.
And Courtney?
Yeah, I think I would reiterate Rajiv's, and this is something that I've been guilty of as well. I think as a founder, you're so aware of that, you're so deep in it, and you're so proud, hopefully, of what you've accomplished. And you also know that traction is a big, factor in terms of investors investing in you or not. And so I think a lot of founders will focus so much on what they've already done and not spend enough time on where they're headed. And there's a quote that I think this image really made sense to me, is when a train pulls up to a station, it doesn't tell you where it's just been, it tells you next stop, New York City. And I think that spending the time on the next stop is super important, because that's what the investor cares about, is how are you going to use my money to get to that next stop.
And Rajiv, this one's only for you. If a project is partially funded by government grants, would this complicate things in terms of potential investment?
Not for me. I mean, I have a company in London. It's called Sixfold Bio, and they're working on ways to deliver drugs to the appropriate cells in your body using nanotechnology. So very cool stuff. And they got millions of dollars of grants from the UK government, and that's non-dilutive. That's incredible. That's an incredible thing. That's a testament to what they could do, and it's non-dilutive money. So that's fantastic.
Great. So we're going to shift focuses and now focus on like the idea and the concept. What are some points as an entrepreneur you should be ready for to convey or talk about during a pitch of your product? And Rajiv, I'll let you take this first one. And then for Courtney and Pranava, I want to hear like a 1-minute pitch of your product. Like give someone an example of like, how to do it. This is interactive, guys. Rajiv, you're up first. What are you looking for?
Can you repeat the question for me? Sorry, I was.
Yeah. So what are some points that entrepreneurs should be ready to convey or talk about during a pitch?
Okay. I mean, they should basically convey like who they are, what problem they're solving, and what's the way that they're going to go about solving that, and show me like the steps along the way, and who they will be selling it to, and why those people will like that. And that's pretty much that. It sounds really simple. It gets complicated, but I think in the end, what they need to convey is not that complicated.
So Courtney, since Rajiv is obviously an investor of yours, let's hear like a condensed version of like your product to just show people like what it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, I'll preface this. I'm happy to do that. I'll preface this by saying that I think there's a lot of the accelerator programs will focus on nailing your 1 minute and 5 minute elevator pitch. And that's definitely important. And I think the more you can crystallize what you're doing, the better. And so I do think it's helpful practice, but very rarely are you having that kind of conversation. So it's almost like a little bit, like all of my investor conversations are very back and forth. They're conversational. It's not me talking at the person. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And I think it shows sophistication as a founder as well. It shows that you're on their playing field and you're trying to get to know them as much as they're trying to get to know you and your business. So I would just say, like, preface this with that. I'll start with the problem that we're solving, which I think everyone can relate to, is the fact that careers have become a lot more dynamic than they've ever been before. Today's professionals are navigating a higher frequency of change, and the changes themselves are a lot more extreme. Yet we're still relying on kind of these old school sources when it comes to career advice and navigating our careers. And so this poses a problem not only to the individual professional, but also the companies that they're working for. It's the number one reason that people leave jobs today is the lack of career growth. So the Lighthouse leverages scalable technology to empower employees to get connected to the right insight at the right time to keep growing in their careers. So I hope that helps.
That's great. Okay, Pranava, you're on the spot.
Being put on the spot. I will do a pitch for an idea that I was investigating for a while, because the current one I'm still fully formulating that one.
Perfect.
But so this particular and I'll actually plus one to what Courtney said about if I had to give a 1 minute pitch and blow someone away, I would fail at that. I'm very conversational. I need people nodding and asking me questions to actually convey value props. So plus one to that. The problem that I was previously looking at was something that I felt very intensely with my teams when I was over at AWS. So at AWS, we have developer teams that build out AWS products, but the same teams are also responsible for the reliability of those products and the resilience of those products. So if, let's say, you're using S3 and S3 goes down, in some companies, what you'll do is you'll have an operations team that gets alerted, and then that operation teams will take a first look at the problem. They'll triage it, and then they'll page in the right engineer. At AWS, the engineers are the people that take a look at the initial problem. So we call that left-shifted DevOps teams. And so because the engineers are getting paged for everything that goes on, there's a lot of burden that's taken on where you get paged, you have to investigate, you do the same routine investigations again and again. So as I saw my engineers go through this, I was thinking to myself, they're doing a lot of the same investigations again and again. I really wish there was an easy way to automate this, where as they're doing an investigation, they're using standard tools. They're using AWS standard tools. Can you somehow capture the actions that they're doing and then chain together a workflow to quickly compile a runbook that the next time that same alert comes in, they can just hit play instead of doing it themselves? So the analogy that I would use is when you go to the hospital, the doctor doesn't take your weight, your temperature, and all the standard metrics. The nurse will do that, and the nurse will hand the compiled metrics to the doctor, and the doctor will continue a higher level investigation post that initial set of metrics. So what I was looking to solve when I was thinking through this was, how do you capture these actions? And the product that I had built and the prototype that I built was looking at the actions that people did for these investigations and would create runbooks for organizations.
Okay, so while we finish this, I'm going to give everyone one more opportunity to do a final thought, almost like, this is about securing investor funding. So what is one actionable item from your perspective that someone can do when it comes to securing that funding? And then attendees, after this, we'll go into the lounge mode. And Courtney, Pranava, and Rajiv, if you want to stick around for 10, 15 minutes and just round robin with actual attendees, we'd love to have you. If they have to leave for any reason, you can go to womenincloud.com/get-introduced, and we'll connect you with them offline. But Courtney, we'll start with you. 1 minute. What's one actionable insight you can give someone for securing investor funding?
I mean, I would say email Rajiv. I know that you focus on female founders, so this only applies if you're a woman. But seriously, if you join this panel, you have context on what he's looking for. You might have related to some of the things he said. I would email or LinkedIn and say, hey, this was interesting. Would love to get your thoughts on what we're building. I think that's, and keep doing that for every event you join.
Before I met my current sponsor at Greylock, who brought me on, one of the things that let me put it this way. One of the things I highly recommend doing is when you're meeting someone, especially if it is a conversation where you're still socializing yourself to find the right VC, also find out what they're interested in and where they've been investing, right? Because especially when you're trying to build out that initial conversation and that initial relationship with a person, having a sense of what they're interested in, where they're investing, that really helps get that conversation going, right? This is also part of the due diligence of trying to figure out who the right person you want to work with is. Do your homework ahead of time, see what they've invested in, see what they can offer you. It's not just the deal you're bringing them, right? So just really doing that homework on before you're meeting that person.
Okay, Rajiv, you're bringing it home.
All right, I'm bringing it home. So my one thing would be, and this is something I actually learned, like fundraising for us, is that maybe take all the potential investors you're looking at or talking to, and then think about who's really aligned with your mission. Because I was actually making that mistake. I was spending time on people who were not aligned with my mission and were a lot of them more tire kickers and things like that. So if you find people that are aligned with what you're doing, that's going to be really helpful. And I would also say, Courtney, if you haven't, I would give up my last closing to you. If you have any asks for the audience or anything like that, because you're so modest, I want to make sure you get it out there too.
Thank you. If you care about your career, you're navigating some changes, shoot us an email. One of the things that we'll do is often we get emails from employees and individuals who want to bring us to their company. And so we have a process to do that. So my email is courtney@thelighthouse.us. And if you have any other questions around fundraising, happy to answer them too.
Blake, you're
muted. We saw the gesture though.
What you didn't know is I did that on purpose. If you check the chat window right now, Women in Cloud has created some really fun interactive memorabilia for this event. I'm sure you've heard "You're on Mute" on Cam on. So check out our new T-shirt that we created just for this conference. It's cool for if you're Zooming a lot and you mic on, cam on, or you're on mute. It's a great way to secure your Women in Cloud attendee experience or speaker session. And one more thing before we go, people are taking pictures of us during the session, but I'm going to give everyone a chance to smile. And I'm going to do a picture for all of us. So on 3, everyone smile. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. We're going to go into the lounge area now, guys. Feel free to mix and mingle with the speakers. Again, if you want to go to womenincloud.com/get-introduce, then you'll be able to get introduced to anyone offline. Thank you, all of you, for attending, speaking. I appreciate it. And you guys are officially closing out the Women in Cloud Summit 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Super cool.